Welcome to the Scent of Beauty. My name is Susan, and this video is titled, It Could Be Worse. And the question that I have, superlative to what? Worse is one of the word in a superlative, describing a superlative adjective. It's the highest quality. It's bad, worse, worst. So it's an extreme level. So it could be worse. Again, superlative to what? So if this is the case, we need a superlative frame of reference, right? A response to the statement. What's the point an individual is trying to convey when this statement is made? What's the point would an individual have to get to in order to shift from worse to worse? It's safe to say the concept of the statement, it could be worse, informs anyone that's listening to it that the individual that made the statement have moved beyond bad at the level of worse, but have found a belief of comfort. At least the statement is saying this. So they found the comfort that they are not at the stage of worse. I just want us to comprehend what the statement doesn't spell out. It only surmises. But there is bad, again, worse, worst. And my question is, are blanket statements covering the entire being or from the top of the head to the neck? And the reason why I say that, because this statement is a short solace of some form of subsistence, a way of kind of supporting oneself at a minimal level. I would say it's kind of like an endurance to cope, hang on in there, lingering in the worst, abide like in that framework of worse, like live in the word that came to mind is subsisted world, right? Just exist. It could be worse. Think about this statement for a moment. And my question is, have you said that? Or I question myself, have I said that to myself? And why? And is it entirely true? This video is a natural progression for me from the last video that I talked about being host, plankton state of being small, microscopic, and having other people host us as individual, as human beings, living inside someone else. So this is a natural progression from that point of reference. And as I continue with this video, you will understand why I made this statement. With this statement, we found the individual have found some form of, I'll say a modicum, or it could be maximum, depending on the speaker though, maximum relief that he or she has gotten that he or she hasn't gotten to the worst state of affairs, but it is a bad and it is a worse state of affair, but they haven't gotten to the ultimate level. Sometimes what the scent of beauty is helping me to realize that I have to not only just think from a mental frame of reference, but my whole body has to be involved in what I'm saying, and not only saying, but process each word. Because we are visceral beings, right? And let me define what visceral means. It's, at least from the Collins Dictionary, they're feelings that one feel very deeply and find it difficult to control or ignore, and that are not the result of thought. So these are feelings that we're not even thinking about. Visceral feelings could come from a removed experience, not even what you're seeing or hearing at the moment, but it can come from a removed experience. So while I'm saying it could be worse, does my body agree with that? My feelings that I'm not thinking about, is it in alignment with that statement? So visceral arises from, again, a deeply felt feeling, and it responds to the feeling as opposed to conscious intellect. American, I think he's 19th century, a philosopher. I know his name is William James, right? He was a philosopher and a psychologist. And he's known to be the father of psychology. And he made a quote, and he said, "Act as if what you do make a difference." It does. A current century philosopher, Martha Nussbaum, I believe that's how she pronounced her last name. She wrote a book, right? And it's titled Upheaval of Thoughts, The Intelligence of Emotions. And one of the things that is said is emotions are not just the fuel that powers the psychological mechanism of a reasoning creature. So it's not always that. They are parts, highly complex and messy parts of this creature's reasoning itself. But the emotions and the intellect are just two parts of our creaturely trifecta of experience. The third, which can be disentwined from the other two, and which is in constant dynamic dialogue with them, the physical reality of the body. So our body does matter. When we look at ourselves, we just look at a whole self. But do you know that there is a message that the body sends to the spinal cord? And it's not the message that we have within our mind. We don't even think many times from our body's standpoint. I believe that it could be worse is one of these blanket statements that we use to cover our entire being, but our body doesn't necessarily is in agreement with this. It could be worse to me. Sometimes it sounds so dismissive of ourself, of our essence. It's kind of a mechanism of an upliftment, almost like an appreciation. It's fortunate at this level, bypass bad already at the worst. So at that level, right, of the experience, finding fortune in the level of misfortune. So again, it's fortunate at this level of misfortune. James Lang theory hypothesis, right? One of them, at least how I conceive it, is the emotion depends on the arousal. My mind can say one thing, but the arousal could be at the maximum capacity in my body. It could be worse. It can't get any worse, I should say, as far as bodily, physically. But my mind continued to believe the statement. And why? Because many times the system of operation on both level is not brought together and take a look at it as a whole. It's compartmentalizing, but not consciously. The body is aroused many times without our minds listening to the arousal. It could be aroused when we see someone we love, that excitement that, we physically feel, or the excitement of fear. When we see someone, it's not necessarily based on the label, it's based on a feeling, a vibration. Sometimes it could be a scent. Emotions have two factors, an arousal and a cognitive factor. I just want to elaborate a little bit more about misattribution of arousal. I think their names were Aaron, Aron, and Dutton, Dutton, right? They did a study about the misattribution of arousal. I think it was 1974 that year. They were doing an experiment with some men that were, I think it was 200 feet above a river, right? And so they were suspended there, and they were, it was a hobbling, like a walkway crossing a bridge, right? But what they did was they throw an attractive woman in the mix, and she was asking them questions, right? So now their body is experiencing being 200 feet above this river, wobbling to get across the walkway, wobbling on that walkway to get across. And so this attractive woman, is talking to them. She gave each individual her phone number, and she said, call me. Not text. 1974. And a majority, or a great amount of the men called her because they thought the arousal was the individual, but it was their body's reaction to being suspended in the air, trying to get across. How do they know that? Because they did it at a lower level, and the men weren't as aroused physically, unconsciously aroused, because that could be going on. Our body could be aroused again unconsciously while we're having these conversations at maximum capacity. So we take these moments to just touch base with the messengers from our body, the scent of beauty that it's sending to our spinal cord, and stopping and listening, because by the time the message gets to our brain for process, we have already determined it could be worse. When in actuality, our bodies are saying that I'm at maximum capacity. It is at the worst for me. We see our organs, we go to doctors for annual physical. But what I want us to take at least a moment to think about is the psyche of our bodies. Daily, it lends itself to our necessities. But the concept of out of sight, out of mind, we could go years, weeks, months without taking a look at our bodies and what it's saying to us. But I just want us to take a moment and think about our body, our minds, and their experiences as separate entities, although they're connected as one unit. It could be worse. Part 1. Welcome to the Center of Beauty.